Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out in the Heat Dome on a beautiful night, nonetheless, to welcome Peng Shepherd for the book launch of her wonderful new book, All This and More. So, Peng, a toast to you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yay, everybody. Now, we have, as I mentioned to you, an interactive concept for tonight. So you want to tell them what it is?
Well, I thought it might be fun. So I can do a little reading from the book to kind of give everyone a taste, since it's the first day it's out. Probably no one's read it yet. And because it is a book about choices and there is an interactive element to the book, I thought it would be fun if we could get some volunteers to read one line. You only have to read like one line. And I'll point to you, or I'll hold the number up. Like when it's your turn, I'll have my fingers up and you say your line. So is anyone brave enough? I need between 2 and 5 to pull this off. So, okay. Well, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, this is great. Okay. We're going to try this.
All right. So she's going to give out cards here to make this work. This is so much fun. We hardly ever have done anything that is this interactive.
This is because this is the first stop. So this is the test run. So if it doesn't work, I won't do it tomorrow in San Diego. Okay. You're volunteer 1 of 5. Pass it back to, wait, who was 3? Okay. Hi, it's so good to see you. Oh my gosh. Hi, good to see you again too. Okay, who was my 4? Were you my?
You want? There's one behind you over here.
Okay. Here's my 4. Do you want to be my 5, Lucia? Okay. All right. So on your, whatever volunteer number you are, on your card, there's a card in your envelope. It has either 1 or 2 lines. And so as I read, I'll try to cue you. I'll tell you're coming up, and I'll go like this. So that means volunteer 1, say your line. Volunteer 2, say your line. Volunteer 3. And then if you've got another one, I'll just like go back. It's your second turn around. Does that?
We expect volunteer 1 to be particularly good at this,
yes.
Right?
We don't have to start off with the reading, but also I expect this to go terrible because I think I planned it right, so we'll see. So I expect this to not work at all.
That's okay. This is a friendly audience. And
yeah, that's why I'm testing it here in the hometown.
Right. Which I love, right. So we've been privileged to do the book launches for Peng, for the Book of Him and the Cartographers. I think she's a fascinating writer, and you are always going to be surprised by what she chooses to write about. This is not, where you come down here and it's book 13 in a series. And I love series, so I don't mean that in any way to be derogatory, but it's interesting for an author who... The general mantra in publishing is that an author should always write the same thing but different. So that's a real challenge, especially for people who write series, So Peng is breaking that mold, and she's not writing the same thing, just she's writing different every time. So what's the inspiration behind this book? Because structurally, it's really interesting, and the concept is interesting. And did you actually learn quantum mechanics to write this book?
I did. No, I didn't. So there is a little bit of quantum mechanics in the book, but it is not really about that. That is just the vehicle through which we learn about the main character. And the story is really about her. It's about Marsh. She's kind of a little bit of all of us to some degree, I think, which is to say she has regrets. We've all got them. And she miraculously wins the chance to go back in time and fix all of these mistakes and all of these regrets that she's made in her past, so that she can have, the wonderful life that she has always dreamed of having. But, it's never that simple. Every choice has consequences, and things start to go wrong from there. So that's the premise.
So structurally speaking, how did you set that up for the reader?
So is this too loud? Is it too close?
I don't know. My voice is shot, so don't pay any attention to that.
You can just kind of... Is that better? A little better? Okay. Yeah, it sounded like I was getting feedback. So how did I structure it? So this is about... it's a story of happiness, regret, second chances. And so I wanted you when you're reading this, when you're reading Marsh, to not just, be reading along on her adventure, but to really be able to think about these questions for yourself and explore this idea of what if, I could go back and redo things. What are things that I would change? And so the book is written so that you can read it straight through if you want, like a typical novel. But at certain points in the text, it will ask you what Marsh should change about her life. And if you want, you get to choose what she changes. And then it changes her story.
So basically, it's kind of like choose your own adventure. You get to a point, and you can move from page 39. I'm just making the numbers up. Page 39 to page, 327 or something, and it goes one way. And then if you don't like how that is, you can go back to page 39, and you can go in a different direction. So it is a book that demands participation from you as a reader. But what fun. And I think I did that when I read it. I made several, leaps and then went back and went in another way. So the story can branch in all kinds of directions, and it leaves you in part in control. Although she controlled the choices that were available to you, nonetheless, you get to decide in what way you want to put them together. I think this is actually a very good book for young adults, for teenagers. I mean, I don't know that there's enough of that anymore, where people make choices and then have to understand consequences. Consequences seem to me is sort of a lost concept all the way around.
Well, I think so. I have a theory about that.
Okay.
Because we all remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books from when we were kids, right? And and we also all remember how exciting it was to get one, crack it open, you just get lost in it for a whole afternoon, making the wildest choices. And I think that at that age, the reason that they're so popular is because when you're a kid, you have almost no choice in your life, right? Your whole day, your whole night is dictated by your parents or your teachers or some other adult figure in your life. And so when you get to make any choice, no matter how, random or outlandish, it's just really fun. And so those kids' books are geared toward letting you make as many choices as possible, even if they almost don't even make sense. So you'll start on page 1 as just this blank slate there's no character. You just slot yourself in. And by page 3, you're on a pirate ship or you're saving your high school from zombies or something. And it's thrilling because you have very little autonomy in your own life. But then you become an adult. And I think we have entirely too much choice in our lives. And none of it is as fun as saving your high school from zombies or getting on a pirate ship. And so I think that is why the genre is trickier for adults, because you can't ask an adult to make choices and have an interactive book just for the sake of the structure or the gimmick, because we have way too many things to decide anyway. It has to really mean something. And so that's what I wanted with this book, because the book is about a woman making choices about what is important in her life and what she wants to change and what she wants to save. By asking you to do that with her, it's kind of forcing you to declare what is really important to you as a person and a reader, because you're making a value call basically by deciding for her.
Very true. But then, aging is sometimes defined as a series of diminishing choices. For every door that you open, there are that many doors that you don't get to open again, unless we'll come back. Well, actually, I'll interpolate this part right now before but I have a wonderful and very wise husband. Not my first husband, but eventually the right husband. And before I started the bookstore, I had retired from a couple of other professions at which I had done really well, which is why I was retired. And my husband one day looked at me. Actually, we weren't quite married yet. And he said these words. He said, "Now that you can do whatever you want, what is it you're going to do?" Which was one of the most motivating things that I could imagine anybody would ever say. And it took me right back to being a teenager, really going off to college. Not everybody gets this opportunity. And I missed being a librarian at the Library of Congress, and I said to Rob, I really miss books, and he said, we're not moving to Washington. We're not going back there. Thank God, as it all turned out. And so he said, what would you like to do with books if you don't have to do anything? This is actually a not-for-profit bookstore. And I said to him, well, my mom lives here, and it would be fun to do something that she'd really like, and she's a lifelong mystery reader, and there were lots of mystery bookstores, so I said, I'll just have a little bookstore. And that's how it all started. 600 square feet over across from Molly's every day. I thought we'd do smell marketing, make coffee, lure people in. I didn't realize that Molly's every day at 11 o'clock started cooking. The garlic came across Main Street. You could walk on the garlic. So we abandoned that. But I feel really lucky that I got a chance to go back and do a whole redo.
You were sort of living this book.
But any one of you might be able to do that as well if you really are brave enough. In my case, I wasn't being brave, but if you were really lucky, somebody might say to you, or you might say to yourself, now that I can do whatever I want, what is it that I'm going to do? So your mom, in fact, let's pick on Lynn Sue here. When you retired, you didn't actually retire, because I saw a piece in the Republic that talked about what you're doing now that's different. Give your mom a microphone and let her tell us about it for a minute.
Tell us? No, I get to serve a different way. I used to serve information, and now I serve families who need compassionate care.
You do, because you're working with Hospice of the Valley, right? And that was
another non-for-profit.
Exactly. But so in a sense, you got to make a different and very rewarding choice.
Yes, and I got to make the choice. I decided to step away. So I think that makes a big difference. It's one thing when you're forced into another path, but when you choose it because you're ready.
Right.
And you have to be a little brave.
Well, yeah. And there's no success that's actually guaranteed, if you do it. But when I read, there was a lovely article in the Republic about, I'm trying to remember what it was, something that there was a senior. Somebody was like 103 or something and lived in the hospice, and they arranged for him to have a birthday party. Wasn't that it? Yeah, which I thought was I'm not that far from it, so I really like that whole idea. But I thought, how wonderful to see that you were doing that and making, enjoying it. Success is measured differently, too. It's a lot different now, maybe the measurement of what's a success than it was when you started. Yep. So, Peng, what did you do to choose to become an author?
Actually, I had one of these moments, too. Now that I was working I had gone to college, and then I'd gotten a master's degree in a totally unrelated field, and I had started working in that field for, 5 years. And I had one of those moments where I was on a business trip for that company, and I don't know, it just crystallized for me, and I thought, if you don't do it now, you'll probably never do it. And so that is the point at which I went home. If I tell the whole story, it sounds very dramatic. It was not this dramatic. I was in Iraq, and it was during a rocket attack. And that was the moment at which I was like, if you don't do it now, then you'll never do it. But that sounds very dramatic. But yeah, so when I got back to London, I started, looking at I Googled, how do you write a book? And that was the start of a really long journey. I ended up actually quitting that company, and I went and I got a degree in creative writing, and then I worked in publishing for a little bit too, because I just felt so new to all of it, and I just wanted to know how the whole thing worked. But yeah, that was also, I guess we all do kind of have one of those moments.
Well, yeah. I'm sort of urging everyone who can to grasp one. That's all. I think, if you're lucky enough and you can do that, it's a wonderful thing. Did you want to read a bit from the book to kind of get us into it?
Sure, I can. Yeah. So, oh man, I'm so excited to see if this works. Oh yeah, please open your envelope so you're ready. So I'm just going to read from the very beginning of the book, like page 1. of the novel. And to set up the premise for you, because you've heard a little bit about it, I'm going to read it directly to you, as if you and all of us are in the world of this book, and we are kind of experiencing the phenomenon that happens at the beginning of the story in real time. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to read. I will. It's going to be very hard with my microphone. I'm going to try to.
Wait.
I think we'll try.
Patrick, do we have a microphone stand at your command back there?
Poor Patrick.
Poor Patrick. Right. I know. We used to have one that we kept back there in the media room, but I don't know that.
No, I think it'll be okay. We'll try. It's only about like 7 or 8 minutes. But I'll try to cue you when we're coming up on it, and then I'll go like this, and so you read. Oh yeah, that's true. Will need the mic.
Pardon me while I
I've
move
made
to the
this
media
very
room for a
complicated.
moment here and
We'll see.
Sorry, what's going on back here?
This is sort of like a metaphor for how it was writing the book. There were a lot of but we'll get there in the end. Oh, there you go.
You did hear your name, but too late. There we go.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to give you, don't go away, I'm going to give you the microphone because there are 5 people out there who will be.
And they're scattered all over. Sorry.
Nice.
My mom is the first one, so you could just stay right there. Yeah. All right. Let's see how this goes. Okay, am I audible? All right. And this is the only bit of quantum mechanics. This is all the quantum mechanics you're going to get, so don't worry. It's the extent of it. It happened one unremarkable Friday night, without prelude, without fanfare, almost as if by accident. Everyone was still eating dinner or driving home from work and had no idea the world had just changed forever because of a television show. Probably the only people who saw the first few minutes of the premiere were the ones who already had the channel on as background noise to be ignored. But it didn't take long. By the first commercial break, the show had taken the entire globe by storm. Family members had called each other, friends had messaged online, and the internet had exploded. By the time the commercials finished and the first episode aired, there were more viewers glued to their screens than for any other broadcast ever aired by an order of magnitude. There were hundreds of millions of televisions in the United States all locked on that channel, and hundreds of millions more devices streaming it from abroad. By the ending credits, more than 4 billion people were tuned in. You were among them, of course, a mildly curious viewer swept up in the excitement. After all, who among us wouldn't want the chance to change their life? Before all this and more, you never really watched reality TV. Or if you did, you'd never have admitted it. Back then, it was still considered a guilty pleasure, something to be embarrassed about, never to admit watching. Now, of course, no one would argue that the show is the greatest work of media ever made, a redefinition of the meaning of art, of humankind. It stuns you now to recall how oblivious everyone was to what was coming. A simple premise. Each season, a contestant would have 10 episodes to try to better themselves, whatever that meant for them. Repair their marriages, or find true love if they were single, or pursue the dream career they'd always wanted with every fiber of their being but had been too afraid to go after. To reach for their joy. It sounded cheesy, and it was. But as soon as that first episode started, you could see that it was also so much more. Strange, voyeuristic, and addictive. Each night, you and every other rapt viewer watched the season 1 star, the innocent, earnest Talia Cruz, try something new to get closer to attaining her dreams. She bravely risked it all, flashing through internships, cities, bad dates, good dates, and hairstyles, happier and happier every time. But it wasn't incredible because Talia was succeeding at the game. It was incredible because it wasn't a game. The changes to her life weren't special effects. They were really happening, all thanks to the bubble. After the first episode concluded, millions of people became armchair physics experts in an instant, of course, including you. Quantum bubbling was the official term. It had something to do with separating observable instances and integrating particles, the scientific literature said. The concept had been discovered a few years ago by a private lab, and it had only been a theory at that point, something that no one outside of academia had paid much attention to, until All This and More proved that it clearly wasn't just a theory anymore. Look, in a nutshell, you remember explaining to your friends at a restaurant, as you all took turns trying to summarize quantum mechanics like you knew what you were talking about. With enough power and control, you can create iterations of reality branching off from one moment, then collapse them all again once you're done. It's like being able to see the future, all possible versions of it at once. The table was quiet for a moment.
You should write the Wikipedia page.
Someone ribbed you.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
The waiter added. But even though no one could really explain it, you could see it happening. After every choice Talia made, everything in the bubble would instantly rearrange itself. Entire rooms or buildings or neighborhoods morphing into somewhere new in real time, right before your eyes. It wasn't like magic. It was magic. You and the entire world cared as much about Talia Cruz as her own family did. More even. You wanted her to finally become the passionate, courageous reporter she'd always dreamed of being, even more than you wanted to love your own job. You wanted her to break up with that lazy, free-riding boyfriend who'd been holding her back since college, to reconcile with her long-lost little brother, and to finally travel with him to visit the place where their mother had been born. You wanted it so desperately for her, it eclipsed all else. Because deep down, you understood the show's implicit promise, that if Talia could be chosen to radically, miraculously change her life, it meant that however remotely possible the chance, so maybe could you. And when the first season ended and Talia really did finally end up free and ready to find her Prince Charming, with her family reunited and in her dream job as the cheery, darling host of a women's issues talk show, along with everything else she wanted, the cry of celebration that went up around the globe could have registered from space. Talia Cruz had really done it. She had really turned her life around, and it had stuck. It was real. A TV show that could literally alter the fabric of reality to change one's life. No wonder everyone, everywhere, was obsessed with the show. No wonder it was all anyone could talk about. No wonder people quit their jobs, gave up their homes, and moved across oceans to attend overpriced workshops to learn the secrets of getting chosen with millions of other desperate people. No wonder they would gladly stand in line until they fainted or even died just for the chance to be a contestant. When season 1 ended, you looked forward to season 2 more than any other event in your life. Except for some reason, season 2 never came. Halfway through filming, the whole thing shut down, and the footage couldn't be aired. Technical difficulties, or legal difficulties, the press releases said, the network promising it hadn't given up, that All This and More would return soon. Days, weeks, months you desperately waited. Every evening, you'd rush through dinner and scramble to the living room to flip fruitlessly through TV channels and scour websites and social media on your phone, searching for news that All This and More had returned, as if the show could be willed back into being if you refused to give up hope. But that deliverance never came. Until one night, long after you've stopped waiting, it finally does. Okay, guys, get ready. My volunteers. It's another unremarkable Friday night. Maybe you're doing the dishes. Hang on. See, now I'm the one that's not ready. All right. It's another unremarkable Friday night. Maybe you're doing the dishes after mediocre leftovers. Maybe you're already on the couch scrolling mindlessly. Maybe you're at work, grinding through a night shift. You hear the music.
You could have all this and more.
An exuberant voice cries at hysterical volume. Good job. Number 2. Yeah.
Life is many things, good, bad, steady, unexpected, but we can all agree that each one is unique. All your experiences, all your decisions have made you the person you are today. But have you ever wondered what you could be doing Instead, if you'd made a different choice.
You're next.
We're about to find out.
You're at the TV at once. Everything else has ceased to exist, but those words, that music, this moment. All this and more is finally back again. And it's the start of the first episode of season 3. A new contestant, a new set of choices, a new chance at perfect. The frame of your television no longer seems like a portal, but mere decoration. Almost like there's no edge to where your life ends and the show begins. You pulled that off. That was flawless.
That really went well. Now, what is this little extra pile of cards right here?
Oh yeah, that would be great if I could have them back. But I think she just returned it so that I could have it for San Diego.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. I was reading them, hoping to learn something, but all right. Right. So did you want to give us an example of coming to a place where you could fork off into outside
to show you what it
yep,
looks like?
outside the straightforward narrative?
Sure. Well, so that's kind of the intro, and that's how you meet Marsh. Marsh is the season 3 contestant, and then you get a little bit of her backstory, and they just kind of pitch her right in, because it's reality TV, so they just pitch her right in, and her first choice, I don't think this is going to spoil much, but her first choice is basically, it's this page, and it's if she didn't break up with the guy that she was recently seeing, or she can go all the way back like 20 years ago or something. And then, that's where you start. You've got to decide if it's something that does she regret something she did yesterday, or does she regret something that happened 20 years ago?
So is there a page direction? If you get to
Oh,
this
sure.
point?
Yeah. So as you're reading it, if you, I have a little thing in the beginning of the book that says how to read this book.
Okay.
And so if you want, you can read it all the way straight through. So the choices are stacked so that if you never know, if you're not sure what to do, you can just choose the first choice, which is always turn the page. And so, but sometimes that might actually be your first choice. Maybe you do want the one so you just turn the page in that case. But if you want to, go back 20 years, then you're going to go to page 429. Just like that.
So tell me how you mapped out this narrative so that it actually worked.
I have no idea. If you have heard me talk before, you have heard me use the term pantser versus plotter. So a plotter is somebody who outlines. It's a writer who outlines. And a pantser is somebody who flies by the seat of their pants. I'm a pantser. That's how I write all my books. And I don't know, outlining just doesn't work for me. I feel that if I've outlined it, then I've already written it. And so I can't, I don't know, the magic is gone.
Well,
for
one
me.
of the reasons I asked you is that Jeffrey Deaver, whom many of you may have read and who will actually be debuting his first collaborative effort with Isabella Maldonado here on September 3rd, wrote a book. Somebody else wrote one a while back, and there's a movie, the name of which I can't remember. But basically, you start at the end of the story, and it moves all the way backwards to the very beginning. And it's an incredible feat, and you could only do it if you outlined it precisely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be. I'm
But
excited about that book.
It's a wonderful book. He is an an outlier, but it didn't involve choices. It was an unwinding, which is a different thing.
So this will probably sound, impossible, but I wrote it without an outline also because I thought that if I did outline it in this case, especially because there are different versions of Marsh's life that you are picking through, I thought if I outlined it, it would start to feel really engineered and the choices wouldn't feel like true to her, And so in my, first draft fevered brain, I thought if I can remember them all without having to write them down, that must mean that they're really authentic, right? That they make sense for her as a character. And so that's why in this case, I made the totally wild decision to not outline it, because I thought, sort of how they sometimes say that if you writers will sometimes wake up from a dream, or they'll have an idea and they think, I got to write it down or I'm going to forget it. And then some writers say, I never write any of those things down, because if I lose it, it meant it wasn't that good to begin with. And if I keep thinking about it, even though I never wrote it down, that means it's really something.
So at the end, though, somebody had to read this book to see if it actually worked. Was that you?
It was me. Yeah. So when I was nearing the end of I know how this works, but my editor is probably just going to open the window and just jump out. If I said
Right.
So at that point, I did make a map, and I sent the map with the final draft, and I said, okay, don't freak out. I have a new idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're warned as a reader, right? Think of all the fun you can have with this book as you keep, going back and making different choices.
Well, and I think it also says something about you too as a reader if you read it all the way through, or if you start jumping right away, or if you start jumping, then you go back, then you redo things. Because that's basically the question that Marsha's asking herself about her life. Like, what makes me happy? What do I want to change? And then eventually the question starts to become, what is too far? Like what is one step too far? What is one change too much? How do you know when to stop? And I think that some people might start to read it in that way, get obsessed with completing it, exploring every option, but that might not necessarily be the best way.
It could also be that a different choice would not take you to a good place.
That could be too.
There's no guarantee that just because it's different, it's going to be any better or it's going to work. There's a lot of risk involved in that.
I think somebody actually says that to Marsha in the book. She's trying to decide if she's going to repair a very long marriage or let it go in favor of the new love. And somebody says to her, just because it's different doesn't necessarily mean it's better. It might be, but yeah.
Right. So maybe everybody here wasn't around for your first two books. So since we have a few minutes, why don't you tell us about the Book of M and the cartographer.
Oh my gosh, that's
Can
so
you even
long.
remember?
I know, right?
It was so
I know.
long ago.
I finished. I had somebody ask me about. Actually, I was on a super secret call about turning the Book of M into a movie, and and they were asking me questions about some characters. And I was trying to fake it through. They were like very minor characters. And I laughed at one point. I said something about it. And they were like, how can you not remember? But I wrote it in 2016. It's a very long time ago.
I know. And you only have so much brain space. And meantime,
Yeah.
it's taken up
Yeah.
by these
It's
other
taken up by
people.
like 8 versions of
Right.
Marsha's life. Okay, let's see if I can do this. So the Book of M, it was my first book. It's about... It's set in our very near future. It's about a mysterious plague that is causing people's shadows to disappear. And if you lose your shadow, you also start to lose your memories, which can be, very dangerous if that's happening on a grand scale. And so the book follows a husband and wife, Ori and Max, who they've survived so far by hiding out in this abandoned hotel until like 2 years into this very strange phenomenon, her shadow disappears. And she runs away because she's trying to protect him. She doesn't want to be a danger to him, and she starts to forget. And so he's got to decide if he's going to, stay safe, or if he's going to follow her and try to find her to have what little time they have left, even though the world out there is very dangerous. So I think it's definitely the darkest one. It's got an ending that a lot of people tell me makes them cry. So if you would like to cry, if you'd like a very sad love story, you should read that one. And the cartographers, it's about map making, surprise, and family secrets. And it follows a woman named Nell. She's a young scholar, and she discovers after the death of her father, who she's estranged from, he's this brilliant cartographer himself, that a seemingly worthless map he had in his possession actually is incredibly rare and incredibly valuable because it has a secret on it. And a lot of people are after it, and it might have been the reason that he was killed. And so she takes this map against her better judgment, runs with it, and tries to see if she can figure out what's going on before they catch her.
In a way, it's kind of a murder mystery, and much of it takes place in the New York Public Library.
It does, yeah.
Yay, which is really fun. But I really love that book. I like
Thank
them
you.
both, but I mean, as a librarian, I was
Oh,
really
yeah.
touched by the cartographer. So there we are. All right. So anything else you'd like to say, or should we see if we have people brave enough to speak up?
Yeah, let's see if we have people brave enough to speak up.
All right.
Yeah.
Do we have a volunteer? Somebody? Okay. Patrick, we need the microphone. There we
There
go.
we go.
So what I admire very much about you, I mean, my son went to All Saints. She was always the star pupil in the whole school. But your 3 books are completely different. And how many people have that insight to write about completely different topics? And I can't wait for your 4th book.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you know a little bit about its. Oh, okay.
I followed your travel.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So does anybody want to speculate about a choice they made that they would do differently?
Oh, that's a good question.
Probably, I know it's hard. It's sort of confessional. Nobody wants to do that? No free books?
Actually, I've got it. So just watch. I'm going to tell this story. I can tell a story about something that I've always wondered about. I don't regret it, but I've always wondered about it. But I'm going to tell this story. My mom is, sitting in the front row. And she's going to be like, no, that's not what happened. That's not what. So
She's actually behind you.
I know. She's just going to like. So this is the story as it is true to me, as I remember it, because it happened when I was very, very little. In fact, I was not born. I was just about to be born. And so, it was told to me so long ago that I'm sure I don't have all the facts right. But the way I remember it, right before I was born, my parents were living in Texas, I think. And my father worked for an airline called Braniff. And Braniff at that point went out of business. And so all these pilots are scrambling to get hired at all of the other airlines. So he was interviewing desperately, trying to get placed anywhere. And he got 2 offers. And one of them was for Southwest Airlines, based in Phoenix, Arizona. And the other one was for Singapore Airlines. And, I'm sure they debated, weighed the pros and cons. Obviously, we know which one they chose. I was born and raised here. And it was great. I mean, it was a wonderful childhood. I'm very grateful for it. But I always I wonder about that path not taken constantly, because it would have happened right at the beginning of my life. And it would have changed everything, like everything. So it's not a regret, but it's a path not taken that I really
You
wonder
could have been
about.
brought up in Singapore and arrested for throwing chewing gum on the sidewalk, if I recall.
Was I even allowed to have chewing gum? Probably not.
Right. On the other hand, you could have hung out at Raffles Hotel and other fun stuff.
I just would have been like too busy eating all the Singaporean food.
I know.
No time for chewing gum. Just eating dumplings.
All right. Anybody inspired now? No? Really?
Yeah.
Ah, good. There's a person.
I think the inspiration for me is the 117 degrees, but Jim and I had a beach house, and when it's 117 out, I think, why did we sell that? Darn.
All right. Right. There's one over here, Patrick. I need to distribute the books too.
Oh yeah. So if you're brave enough, you get a free book.
Yep.
So it's not really like my choice, but I was adopted, so I kind of just wonder what my life would be like if I wasn't adopted.
Yeah.
Like if my birth mom decided to keep me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Maybe she didn't have a choice.
yeah, she was only 18 at the time, and it was a third world country. So
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Book for you. Here you are. The books, by the way, are set in Paris at the Paris exhibition, so more or less the turn of the 20th century. So if you're not going to the Olympics, this is your chance. This is your chance to go to Paris for another exhibition. Right. Yes, sir.
So a decision I made is actually kind of writing related, which is kind of fun.
Oh.
But I did my first year of college up in Flagstaff. And if you've been to college, you have to take English 101. And so I took English 101, obviously. And my professor really liked what I had written. I was kind of pushing what you could do with English composition, right? Like, oh, let me come up with a creative title for this or something. And so one day he asked me, you should take my creative writing class and write a story. And I had to like think about it because I was like, I don't really like write. Like my mom's the writer, you know. But I was like, okay, I'll take it. And so I went through the class and I wrote, and he really liked the story, and now it's going to be like published in like the school magazine and
Oh,
stuff.
congrats.
And it's
That's
really
exciting.
cool that now that then I've gotten back into reading and stuff. So it was more of like a positive choice that I made
Yeah.
that I don't
It's
think-
not one you do
yeah,
over.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't regret. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
but
kind of
it's. I mean, it's so great that he did that, because it would have been very easy for him not to. You know, it would have just been.
be like, oh yeah, but
Yeah.
just the way to be like, oh, I'm gonna recognize this person and like see if he wants to do this, because it's
So do
fun.
you think if you hadn't agreed to go ahead that you might always have regretted not
little
doing
bit.
it?
Yeah, because I guess in a class you're forced to actually finish a story, not just kind of like write and then be like, oh, I'll just throw right. Because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, I'm gonna write a book, and then they get through 20 pages. They're like, this sucks. I don't want to do it anymore.
It does
you know?
suck. It's fair.
So, yeah,
Good for you. All right. Book for you. Patrick, there's the microphone. Anybody else want to speak up?
Yeah, we can do questions too. Yeah, and then we have another path up here.
Good.
Okay, it's 2 questions.
Okay.
First one, are there any yaks in this story?
Maybe in one of the paths. Yeah.
Okay. That's
Good memory.
Okay, and then number 2, who are some authors that you enjoy reading?
Oh, that's a great question. Who have I been reading lately? There's an author named Helen Phillips that I really, really like. She writes super short books. They're really slim, and they're just so unnerving. But it'll be like a totally normal situation, like, I don't know, just like a mother raising her kids, and she manages to make it. I can't even describe it. It's just her stuff is so suspenseful and so creepy and so dark, and like really makes you think about, you know, like who actually am I? So she's one I'm really excited about. We were just talking about this in the back. Lev Grossman's new book, The Bright Sword, which is like an Arthurian retelling, that's coming out next week. I've actually been waiting 10 years for this book. I heard him read from it, like a very early, excerpt about 10 years ago. And I put it on my list, and now I finally get to read it next week.
You know, I was telling her that if you've never read it, The Once and Future King is a real eye-opener on the Arthurian legend. And I read it in 1960 when I was a sophomore at Stanford University. And it made me see historical fiction and myths in an entirely different way. So I would recommend reading a copy of The Once and Future King by T.H. White if you get a chance, because it's really an eye-opener. But I haven't read Lev's book either. We actually did an event for his very first book ever.
Oh, Warp? Codex,
which was
I
a
read that.
wonderful book.
Yeah.
And then years ago, I was in New York, and I went into a rare bookstore on Madison Avenue, and I was looking around, and for some reason, I don't remember why, I introduced myself to the proprietor by saying something like, I'm Barbara Peters, and, I have a bookstore in Scottsdale. And wild shrieks emerged from the back room of the bookstore. And this woman came flying out. Turned out it was Lev Grossman's wife. Oh. And she said to me, oh, my God, she said, the first books he ever saw and signed were yours.
Oh, that's cute.
I know.
That's
Isn't
really
it great? It was
cute.
Codex, which is a marvelous book.
Yeah,
So let's
yeah.
hope that this one.
Oh, it will be. It's
So
gonna
we
be
have
amazing.
signed copies in the back room
Yeah.
in case you're interested.
You got to
We
come
could
back
bring them
next
out.
week, though. I think.
Right. Okay. So who's
Yeah.
another brave person?
Yeah.
You,
Who else?
sir.
I'm going to try to think of other authors while the microphone walks. What I've read lately: Susan Choi is great. Charles Yu. George Saunders. If you haven't read George Saunders' short fiction and his book, that he's, I don't know, might be like my favorite author in the world right now. It's just no one explains what it's like to be a human better than he does, I think.
That's a wonderful
Yeah,
endorsement.
that's what it's everything he writes is so amazing.
Yes, sir.
What I was going to say, what I do for a living is make sure that people tell the truth, sort of the job that Barbara had at one time, making sure that people tell the truth. And I didn't, and I've regretted it, and it's because I was a pretty good baseball player as a kid and wanted to play baseball and played in the outfield, but about a freshman or sophomore in high school, I was a little vain and didn't need glasses and couldn't pick the ball up as it came off the bat and see it in the outfield. And of course, couldn't make plays, and the coach was pissed off at me that I can't make a play. And he said, "You can't see the ball, can you?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I can see it. I just missed it." And after a while, he said, "Well, you're not going to play anymore." And that was the end of it.
Yeah.
And so the regret is by not being truthful. What I tell people today, just tell the truth. If I just told the truth, he would have sent me to the nurse's office at high school here in Phoenix and had an eye exam, and they would have figured out I needed glasses, and hey, maybe things would have turned out different. So you got to tell the truth. The moral of the story is I didn't tell the truth.
That's a good lesson.
That's so hard to do when you're young, because when you're young, you think that every eye is riveted upon you. You really do. And when you get to be older, you realize that nobody actually cares. So, I mean, I can understand your impulse for concealing it, But as you say, it would have been better. Yep. All right. Anybody else?
Oh, we got one more.
Just a cute story my husband told me when I told him that my friend and I are coming here tonight. Can you all hear me? Oh, great. Yeah. David is his name, and he loves books. He loves bookstores. And many years ago, he came to the Poison Pen for a book signing, just out of curiosity. And he listened to the presentation, and then at the end, he did not buy the book. He said, "Oh, I don't read, horror stories. This is just some mom who wrote about vampires." And so now he's regretting that he does not have a signed first edition by Stephanie Myers.
Oh, no. That's a great lesson. Always buy the book. Always buy it.
I remember that signing, Barbara, don't you? There was like a little circle
do.
of goth-looking girls, and that was about it.
That's amazing.
I thought for a dizzy moment you were going to talk about Anne Rice, and Patrick may remember, because briefly he worked at another bookstore here before we poached him, and he's been here 30 years, I guess, by now. But Anne Rice did an event in which I understand that some fans came with dental implants in order to really be the vampire thing.
Wait, wasn't she the one that showed up to an event in a coffin and then rolled out the coffin or something?
Anything is possible, right? But it's really true, and this is a moment when I could say to you how important it is to come to a debut author event, because you never do know whether that author is going to turn into Jack Carr or Diana Gabaldon or whoever it might be. And you can only really be a virgin once, right? At least a book virgin. And it's nice to support them, but it also gives you a chance to say forever that you were there, when that thing happened. We're fortunate that we get to do an enormous number of events for debut authors. Remember the part I said about not being for profit? Because it's a real financial risk for a bookstore to try to do something for somebody that nobody has ever heard of. But actually, that's the most fun thing in many ways. No offense here, but I actually love debuting authors. I think there's almost nothing more fun than introducing you to a new voice. I love doing it. Patrick really likes doing it too. Yeah, sometimes I worry that we're kind of losing our mission because we're so in demand. Do you know that we did 400 events the first year of COVID? They were all Zoom events. Sometimes I did 3 a day. Patrick sometimes would do 2 a day. So it kind of crowded out sometimes things that I would
PTSD
would rather have done. We were all very the best thing, if there's any good thing that came out of the pandemic, was the Zoom technology, which allowed us to do things that we could never have done before. We figure right now that 80% of our customers don't live here, which is why we're doing the streaming, right?
Yeah.
You didn't see Pong signing all the books in the back room because this is actually not the bookstore, it's the rest of the building. I know. Why is it called the Poison Pen? Because in the days before Twitter, God love them, if there was going to be some kind of destructive gossip or whatever that would circulate, people wrote what were called poison pen letters. If you read Agatha Christie, you will discover that this was in a day when shame was a powerful motive for people. Today, that seems to have disappeared. And so it was often in a small situation like a village where somebody would try to destroy a reputation by circulating, letters of exposés or whatever that was really mean. And I thought that was kind of a nifty literary title for what was intended originally to be a mystery bookstore, although we haven't been one for probably 20 years. But unfortunately, Poison Pen was taken by a very unpleasant website. And I wanted to trademark Poison Pen. And our trademark attorney said to me, I've always loved this story, said to me that you will have to get the owner of Poison Pen to agree to let you be Poison Pen because it's so close the trademark people won't let you do it.
Oh my gosh.
You understand that, right, as a lawyer, sir? So our lawyer tried, and she was adamant that she was not going to agree to it. So finally he said, I give up. And I said, well, I'll just have a try. So I called her up, and I asked her, I think what I said to her was, is there something you would really love that you can't really access easily? And she said, I won't tell you who the author was. She said, I'm a real fan of author whatever. And I sat right up and I said, well, if I were to promise you a signed copy of every future book that this author writes, would you agree to sign off on our application? Oh, yes, she said. So for 15 years, I sent her a signed book every year by this author.
Wow.
My lawyer was so impressed. And he said to me, I would never have thought of that. But it's true. So that's why it's poisoned. And, the end, the ED causes a lot of problems, frankly. If any of you have tried Poison Pen, instead of Poison Pen, you will realize that, making it poisoned is more difficult, but that's the reason for it. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that story at the end here when everybody else is done. Anybody else like to speak up? Come on, this is a friendly group. All right. Good. I coached you at the very beginning.
Thank you. Thank you for your very inspiring writings. Yeah,
Well,
very
thank you.
thought-provoking.
Thank you for reading.
And so interesting. So thank you so much. So I always wonder what would have happened to my life if I bucked my dad's warning to me. So I went to school, to music school, and I was very big into jazz. And I lived in Chicago, or very near Chicago. And my father always bought me any instrument I wanted. Oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. Okay, come on, let's go get it. And then I asked him for a specific instrument. And he said, no, girls are not going to play that. I was like, Dad, no, I'm not buying that one for you. I said, no problem. I'll just get one from the school. I'll figure it out on my own. So after I graduated, I said, well, I'm going to go into Chicago and be a jazz musician now. And he sat me down and just, even though I was 22, I was like, okay, Dad. And he said, you're not going to do that. No daughter of mine is going to go live in Chicago. This was in the 80s, and be a jazz musician. And I wanted to really buck that, but I realized later that he saved my life because the scene was very, very bad at that time. Yeah. But I always wonder what that path would have happened.
Yeah.
What
could have been, not Dolly Parton, but we could come up with somebody. Right.
You got the voice. Could be Sarah Vaughan over here. Come on.
Absolutely. Anybody else? We still have 3 books to go.
2?
Ah,
Okay.
look, right here, Patrick.
Right there.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait.
Oh, wait.
She's next, and
You're
then
next.
you. All right. Go ahead over there.
So for about 15 years, my family would go to this little town in Montana every year. Every summer, every fall, and sometime in the spring. And we absolutely loved it. We bought some land up there on top of a hill. We had plans for a house. We planted trees. And then the economy changed and we had to sell it. And I always wonder what our life would have been like if we could have stayed there where we loved it so much. And I still think about that. Things are, not much different there, but certainly a lot different here than 40 years ago.
Very true. And sometimes the choices we make are forced upon us, aren't they? They're not made freely.
They are.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
But it worked out. But I still think about it all the time.
I can imagine. Patrick, for her?
Oh.
No, that's
no.
not fair.
She can give it as a gift.
No, yeah, well, actually, I do have a different one because I only had 9. Give her the Tiger's Tale, which is a book coming out in September, and it is about somebody who makes a really bad choice. All right, no.
Yeah.
The next one, right here. Right.
Mine's a little bit more complicated as a result of what you were just talking about. But this is a little bit of a different spin. I've got parents that live in Tucson. They lived through the Depression, and their entire life they have been consumed with saving and not spending any money. My dad's going to be 87 in September. My mom a few years younger than that, but they were always saving. So eventually they could do this and that and the other thing, and then time flew by, and they're just not able to do that anymore. And I looked at their situation, and always trying to encourage them to spend some money, and before they aged out of some of this stuff, and they wouldn't listen to me. But as a result of watching them, I've made substantial changes in my life, so that I don't end up in that situation. Now they've got a really happy life. They've got 4 grandchildren. This is one of them, my daughter. COVID was the world's best thing that happened to me, because I realized that I can conduct my business almost entirely virtually. I've always wanted a second home in a cooler place, and in the middle of COVID, I bought a house in this sleepy little town in Montana. As far northwest as you can get, and I feel like I'm living the dream. When I told my parents I was coming down here to Phoenix to see Pong, they said, "You're going to come all the way and spend all that money to to come to Phoenix for the book tour?" And I can't imagine doing anything different. She's
Good for you. Good for you. Giving ourselves permission to do things is sometimes very hard. Right. Yeah. All right. We have 2 books to go. Anybody?
Hi. Well, we just happened to come into town today for unfortunate reasons, but fortunate reasons. And I'm here with my mom. And I said, the bookstore's open. Let's go walk around. So we came in. And I love the fact that we came in. I wish we would have come in sooner so we could hear the whole talk of the book. But my life has been crazy these last couple of years. But make a long story short, I don't know how my life would be if my dad was still alive. Just hearing people talk about changes, how things have changed in the last 5 years with COVID, and then COVID being over and not being over at the same time. And my dad has been gone will be 11 years. And we've been fortunate enough these last few years to do things that we haven't been able to do when he was alive. And I just got to say that, you know, you can plan all you want to plan, but you never know what the road is going to take you.
Such a good lesson.
Very true.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Ask one of the people at the desk. You can actually go and watch the entire program on either YouTube or Facebook if you missed it. She's also illustrated our marketing plan. That's it, right? We open the door.
Yeah.
Right. See, she gets a book, Patrick, and then we have one more book.
Here we go.
All right, who's the last person brave
here.
enough to do this?
So I know this might be kind of a touchy one for us globally, but the biggest thing I wonder is what would our world look like today if COVID never happened?
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
often sit and point out, like, this happened to us as a result of COVID. But many of those things are actually positive as well. We took more time to look at ourselves and spend time in our homes with our families, and that was a positive. But there were many other things that were not so positive that happened. So I look at my life myself and the time that I had with my love and his family, and it was just a beautiful gift. But at the same time, I lost people I loved. So there are many different choices in that.
Yeah.
That if it had never been presented, what would it look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
COVID was not the first pandemic, and every single one has created great change in society because it upended things. It was terrible for a lot of people, and I think here in Arizona we were perhaps less touched in many ways than we might have been if we'd lived in other climates. So to address your question, Sue Lynn, I didn't retire voluntarily from the practice of law. I became a plaintiff in a very large medical malpractice case, which I won. I have a paralyzed leg as a consequence of the whole thing. So that wasn't a choice that I made voluntarily. But remember the husband that I mentioned to you, the great husband that said, now that you can do whatever you want, what is it you're going to do? I have had a very complicated life. I was a Vietnam War widow. I made a ridiculous second marriage. Other things happened. But anyway, I was looking sad about something, and one day this wonderful husband looked at me. Now, here's the thing. You have to be as old as I am. I'm 83. Okay? So you have to take it from the perspective of I've had a happy ending. I already know how my life came out. Not everybody gets to have one. But Rob said to me, and I really think about this a lot, he said, if you'd made any other choice anywhere along the way, you wouldn't be married to me and you wouldn't have the bookstore.
He's a keeper.
He is
a
a
smart
keeper.
one.
He really is. But, you know, not everybody gets a happy ending. Yeah. And you only know it if you live to be as old as I am, that it worked out. But I don't say that because to encourage you not to make any changes, because when you're young, you do have opportunities, or even when you're older. I mean, what was it, Colonel Sanders? Wasn't he 90 when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken? I think he was. Pretty sure he was, if you look it up. I know he was certainly my age or possibly older. You're never really too old to make a positive change. Mm-hmm. But I think the message is that you shouldn't regret what you did that got you to be a senior. Yep. You know, and then you should go from there. Yep.
Yeah. Oh.
I didn't hear. Can you repeat it?
The question was, what is book 4?
You're so greedy.
That is a good. No, actually, I have started writing it. I'm about halfway through the first draft. I haven't really had to pitch it yet, so I'm gonna. I'll pitch it now, and you can tell me how it is. It's so it is. It's going to be a very dark psychological suspense about body doubles who are hired to impersonate somebody very famous and powerful. And I guess what happens as their lives become more and more intertwined and they start to lose their grasp on their own identities. Wow. Very dark and twisty. Yeah.
Is AI going to interfere with that at all?
No, it's very.
I mean, body double in real. I mean, because AI creates body
Yeah,
doubles.
yeah. No, these are
digitally,
all
but you're
these are
talking
all
about
like
real time. Right?
Yeah, these are like lookalikes.
Okay.
Yeah, like political decoys, kind of. Yeah, lookalikes, body doubles, doppelgangers. So they're they're hired to impersonate somebody who's very, very powerful, very famous, rich. But what happens to you if you
think that's your lifestyle for
no,
real?
it's more like what happens to you if you spend more time pretending to be someone else than yourself, or if you're the original. What happens to you if somebody's better at being you than you are, right?
Oh my God, that's a fabulous premise. Well, we'll have to do this all over again.
In 2 years, everybody come back.
It'll
be
be
here 2
great.
years from now.
Thank you all very much for being so open to doing a different program. I hope that having road tested it, you'll give this one a chance.
Yeah,
in
we're
other
gonna do
venues.
this tomorrow in San Diego.
All right,
So.
sounds great. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.